Hi all, introducing me Dian Hermalia Andesta NPM 224111067 Management Class 22A. In this video I will discuss the material on ownership structure and corporate governance. Ownership structure is the composition, portion, ratio or percentage between capital equity including shares owned by people in the company and investors. Ownership structure can be in the form of individual investors, government and private institutions. The ownership structure is a form of commitment from shareholders to delegate a certain level of control to managers. The company owner will appoint professional agents who have first been selected through selection, who will then carry out their duties to manage the company, which in turn is required to be able to maximize company value. The following is the definition and understanding of ownership structure from several source books. According to Hermalia 2005, ownership structure is the composition of capital between debt and equity, including the proportion between insider shareholders and outside shareholders. According to Sugiarto 2009, ownership structure is the ratio of the number of shares owned by insiders to the number of shares owned by investors. According to Sedana 2011, ownership structure is the separation between company owners and company managers. The owner or shareholder is the party that puts capital into the company, while the manager is the party appointed by the owner and authorized to make decisions in managing the company, with the hope that the manager acts in accordance with the interests of the owner. Ownership structure theory. There are several different approaches to ownership structure theory, including 1. Agency approach. This approach assumes that there is a conflict of interest between the owners and management of the company. 2. Voting rights approach. This approach assumes that shareholders who have greater voting rights will have greater control over the management of the company. 3. Market approach. This approach assumes that ownership structure can affect firm value and firm performance. 4. Interest group approach. This approach assumes that ownership is not only concentrated in shareholders, but also in other interest groups. Institutional ownership. According to Nabila, 2012, institutional ownership is the proportion of shares owned by institutions at the end of the year as measured by percentage. The institutional ownership variable is measured by the percentage of the number of shares owned by other institutions outside the company of at least 10% of the company's total shares. According to Wahudi and Poestri, 2006, institutional ownership is the proportion of share ownership owned by institutional owners and blockholders at the end of the year. According to Bernandi, 2013, institutional ownership is the ownership of shares of a company by institutions or institutions such as insurance companies, banks, investment companies, and other institutional ownership. Institutional ownership has a very important role in minimizing agency conflicts that occur between managers and shareholders. The existence of institutional investors is considered capable of being an effective monitoring mechanism in every decision taken by managers. Institutional ownership is measured using an indicator of the percentage of share ownership owned by the institution of the entire outstanding share capital. The existence of institutional ownership can indicate a strong corporate governance mechanism that can be used to monitor company management. Managerial ownership. According to Bernandi, 2013, managerial ownership is the level of share ownership by management who is actively involved in decision-making. Managerial ownership can align the interests of shareholders with managers, because managers directly benefit from the decisions taken and managers who bear the risk if there are losses arising as a consequence of making wrong decisions. According to Effendi, 2013, managerial ownership is the percentage of share ownership owned by directors, managers, and the board of commissioners. The separation of share ownership and company supervision will lead to a conflict of interest between shareholders and management. Managerial ownership provides an opportunity for managers to be involved in share ownership, so that with this involvement the manager's position is equal to shareholders. Managers are treated not only as external parties who are paid for the benefit of the company, but are treated as shareholders. So it is hoped that the involvement of managers in share ownership can be effective in improving manager performance. Managerial ownership is the level of share ownership of management that actively participates in decision-making. The level of share ownership of management that actively participates in decision-making is measured by the proportion of shares owned by managers at the end of the year expressed in shares percentage. The existence of managerial ownership in a company will lead to an interesting conjecture that firm value increases as a result of increased managerial ownership. If the ownership of shares by managers is low, there is a tendency for the manager's opportunistic behavior to increase as well. With managerial ownership of company shares, it is considered to be able to harmonize potential differences in interests between management and other shareholders, so that problems between agents and principals are assumed to disappear if a manager is also a shareholder. Public ownership. According to Wigianti, 2009, public ownership is the proportion or amount of share ownership owned by the public or the general public who do not have a special relationship with the company. Public ownership is the percentage of share ownership owned by outsiders. Companies that are publicly owned tend to be stricter in monitoring their company's operations. This is because outside investors demand hard work so that the investments they make can provide large returns as well. Public owners may have more efficient information to meet the internal needs of their company. This can encourage managers to be more concerned with the interests of their shareholders. Implications of ownership structure on corporate governance. Some things that need to be considered are: 1. Transparency. Companies with concentrated ownership may be less transparent than companies with dispersed ownership. 2. Accountability. High managerial ownership may increase management accountability as they have the same interests as shareholders. 3. Minority protection. A concentrated ownership structure may threaten the rights of minority shareholders. 4. Decision-making. A complex ownership structure can slow down the decision-making process. Thus the explanation of the material that I can convey. Hopefully friends can understand what I explained. Thank you.